Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. If you could do me a quick favor, see that little subscribe button at the bottom of your screen? Go ahead, click that subscribe button. Really does help our channel grow, our audience grow, and I really do appreciate it more than you know. So click that subscribe button. Appreciate your support. Now, here's the video that you came here for. Kentucky coaching update here on the Aaron Torres pod. Because at the end of the day, UConn wins its national championship. But this story, I still, guys, I'll tell you this. I did about 2 hours of live coverage. If you include the interview with Wes Moore, I did 2 hours of live coverage, and it took me until after we were done to kind of realize, like, oh my God, John Calipari is really leaving the University of Kentucky for Arkansas. I cannot believe it. So we have 24 hours to process, but what's also interesting is we got 2 or 3 very interesting coaching updates that I think are at least worth discussing very quickly before we get out of here. And obviously we will react when Kentucky makes a hire, whenever that may be. So first off, I'll say this. It was kind of interesting. I guess there was a little bit of a narrative. I'll be honest. I was so busy today with the game and shooting content for BetUS and everything. I didn't even realize, like, I guess there was like about a 6-7 hour period, maybe not 6, but maybe like a 2-3 hour period where Kentucky people were saying that John Calipari might not be able to get out of his contract. I guess the setup was kind of that, if I understand it correctly, is that he was supposed to, alert Mitch Barnhart, his AD, that he was going to be potentially interviewing for other jobs. And if not, he was in breach of contract. And so I saw that report. I'm not disputing it, but I found the report kind of weird. First of all, Wes Moore, who was on our show, said, look, nothing's going to happen on Tuesday. We got this solar eclipse. Everybody drives to Arkansas for some reason to see it in Arkansas. I don't know what makes Arkansas so special, but he's like, all of our news crews are going to be covering the eclipse. We've been planning for that for weeks. There will be no announcement because Arkansas doesn't want to upstage the national championship game, and they can't really do anything anyway. They want to make it a big splash. So guess what? You're going to wake up on Tuesday. You're going to get an announcement from Arkansas. You'll probably get a press conference on Wednesday, and then Arkansas and Calipari take over the entire week going forward. And so I just bring that up to say that, the idea that Calipari was somehow not going to get out of his contract didn't make sense. By the way, that was the godsend prayer that Kentucky fans have been asking for, because if you fire him, you got to pay him $33 million to go away. He's leaving for free. So why the heck are you complaining that he didn't give you ample notice? Of course he didn't give you ample notice. Listen, we can argue about what went wrong and why he's the guy. Is he not? What happened? What was obvious was that he didn't have a relationship with Mitch Barnhart, and I think equally as important, like him and the fans by the end, it was just so bad. And I don't blame the fans. I don't even necessarily blame Cal. I blame Cal more than the fans, but I don't blame the fans. But, like, of course he's not going to be forthright about it. He's trying to get the deal done. And that's what I said. If you remember, before the thing even happened, when the Wes Moore tweet first went out, I said, listen, all I can tell you is Arkansas people think it's going to happen. And the fact that Kentucky people can't confirm it makes sense, because why is John Calipari going to help Kentucky? So anyway, there was that whole fiasco. That was the first update. But let's get to the interesting developments over the last 24 hours since the John Calipari coaching thing first happened. So first off, I'll give Pete Thamel credit. Saw him 3 or 4 times tonight. He put out a report that Chicago Bulls coach Billy Donovan is actually the favorite in the clubhouse to get the job. Now, we'll talk about if it's realistic or not in a minute. But at the same time, I am not surprised by this. Okay, so first of all, Mitch Barnhart, people might know this. Remember, I wrote the book on the Kentucky Calipari's first year, okay? I bring it up because Mitch Barnhart in 2009, when Calipari tried to get the job, John Calipari got the job, but Billy Donovan was atop the list. Mitch Barnhart wanted that job. Mitch Barnhart wanted Billy Donovan, okay? So Mitch Barnhart wanted him in 2009. I believe, and Kentucky fans, correct me if I'm wrong, because I don't know that much of the history, but Barnhart has been at Kentucky since 2002, and I believe in the cycle that Billy Gillispie was hired, he wanted Billy Donovan as well. So he's tried to hire Billy Donovan twice. And, third time's a charm. And what I will say about Mitch Barnhart is this. I will give him credit for this one thing. I said it on Sunday night when this all broke. I said, if you start the search with Scott Drew, your fan base is going to turn on. You have to make the phone calls to the big guys. If you get turned down by a Jay Wright, which we'll talk about, by a Nate Oats, by a Dan Hurley, that's okay. But you can't not go out swinging. Now, I think you need some bigger, energy when you go to Jay Wright and say, listen, you sure I can't get on the phone with you for 10 minutes? You sure whatever. But the bottom line is that Billy Donovan is the lead candidate. Now, Pete Thamel reported that it is Donovan now. Because first of all, the Chicago Bulls are now 78 games into their season. They now have a grand total of 4 regular season games left, if my math is correct. And their season ends next Sunday. And so what's interesting, I will say this. Calipari, you can argue, you can fight it. But if Calipari had tried to take a job, say 3 weeks ago, there was no way they could wait for Billy Donovan. But now it's the 8th. His season ends potentially next Sunday, and he could potentially be available. And so if you're Billy Donovan, listen, I'll say this. Is he going to take it? It sounds like he probably is not interested, okay? But if you're Billy Donovan, I think you got to think about it. Because, one, you've been in the NBA since 2015. It hasn't worked out. This is what? Let's see. This is year 4 in Chicago. You have played in 1 playoff series and lost it. You are, as a head coach in the NBA, at about a 56% win percentage. You had the moment in time with KD and Russell Westbrook. It all broke up. And since then, you haven't got out of the first round of the playoffs. So you're not getting a third NBA job. And I think, look, Billy Donovan's still pretty young. He's 58 years old. He's like 6 years younger than Cal. And I do wonder, does he have one more job left in him? Because I think he needs to at least consider it. And I know what people say, oh, he's been out of college for so long. I think in some ways it's going to help. It's the NIL era. It's the portal era. You don't have to build through high school players. I know he was tired of recruiting back when he left, but I think it's kind of worth noting this, is that the collective handles everything now. You tell them what players you want, and let's make sure we get the money right. And if Billy Donovan is hired, money is not going to be an issue at Kentucky. And so I could go on and on, but I think Billy Donovan has to consider it. Now, will he? I don't know, but I think he should. You're 58 years old. You're going to get fired. You don't want to coach anymore at 58? You're just going to go lay on a beach somewhere? What's wrong with you, man? Come on, Billy Donovan. Billy the Kid. You got plenty left in you. So I think Billy Donovan, to me, listen, I give Mitch Barnhart credit. I think he's got to make the call. Really quickly, we got 2 other updates, and they weren't good ones. Not surprising, but they're at least worth noting really quick. The first one, Jay Wright. Jay Wright is not coming to Kentucky. And so what I will say is what I've said consistently all along. I do think you have to make the call if you're Mitch Barnhart. I don't know how aggressively he pursued. Now, I will say with Mitch Barnhart, I think there's probably a possibility that he may have tried behind the scenes to make something happen previously. Not previously, but if, what I'll say is this. Like when the John Calipari stuff happened, you're trying to figure out, are you going to pay $33 million to fire him? I don't think you can fire him unless you know you're getting a Jay Wright, a Billy Donovan, a somebody of that caliber, a Nate Oats, a Dan Hurley, or whatever. And so my guess is that the vetting process with Jay Wright already happened, and Jay Wright has told them, no, I'm not interested. Still think you got to call. If I called, I'd say, here's the number. Oh, what's the number, Jay, that we got to talk about to make this happen? This is the SEC and Big Ten world. We have more money than we can ever spend. What do you need to at least consider? I said Billy Donovan's 58. Jay Wright's still pretty young, but you don't have 5 years left in you. You just want to do TV for the rest of your life. Is that really what you want to do? And so I would have put some money in front of him that at least made him seriously consider. But Jay Wright's off the board. With Jay Wright, I'll just say this, is that, look, with Jay Wright, I've said it before. I said, I do think he's probably done coaching college basketball. I think there's 2 possibilities that get him into coaching again. One, I think the NBA is not totally off the table. I don't think it's likely, but I don't think it's totally off the table. 2, the other thing that I think could happen, and I think this is actually more realistic, Villanova's missed the NCAA tournament the last 2 years. Last offseason, They loaded up in NIL. They made sure that the coach, Kyle Neptune, got paid as far as NIL is concerned, okay? And I bring it up because Villanova fans would even talk about it. Like when they would lose, they'd be like, this is a $3 million team. What are we doing here? And so I only bring it up to very simply say Villanova fans know how much was spent on this team. And that I don't know if they're going to be willing to spend the same this offseason. At the same time, if Kyle Neptune doesn't get into the NCAA tournament this year, I think there's a possibility he gets fired. Now, maybe he gets year 4 because he's a Nova guy. But remember, he didn't take over a bad program. He took over a Villanova team that was coming off a Final Four run. And it's worth noting they returned like 3 starters. So I just bring it up because if I had to guess, Jay Wright is probably done with college basketball. But Villanova, if it all fell apart, I could see him being in the mix there. And then the other big story, by the way, from Monday, Nate Oats is not the head coach, not going to be the head coach at BAM. Okay, what I'll say about Nate Oats is this: when I was live on Sunday night talking to Wes Moore and going live and all this stuff, I had 2 or 3 pretty high up people at UConn or at Kentucky. I'm tripping over my schools again. Say Torres, he's the number 1 guy. And I said, I'm sure he is. He would have been for me too. By the way, I said it when I did a coaching candidates list when Calipari, lost to Gonzaga for that 3rd straight home game. And I said, Nate Oats is probably the number 1 guy, but you got to do it quick because, his buyout was $10 million at the time. Well, his buyout's $18 million now. And a couple things. I'll say this. A couple things stand out. One, I think it was Jim Dunaway, one of the reporters down in Alabama, said that he believed that money would not preclude Kentucky from going after Nate Oats. In other words, if Nate Oats wanted the job, they would figure out a way to pay that $18 million. But I know this is going to sound crazy. I know it's going to sound crazy. I think Jay Wright is truly happy, or Jay Wright, man, I'm tripping over all my guys here. I think that Nate Oats is truly happy at Alabama. I think he's truly happy at Alabama. My understanding is he loves the community. He's a boat guy. He's got a little boat in one of those lakes over there. I don't know how it all works in Tuscaloosa, but he's content. I don't think he's the kind of guy that needs the spotlight. I don't even know if he's the kind of guy that would like being in the spotlight. I don't think he hates coaching at a football school alongside Nick Saban, alongside Kalen DeBoer. So I've never thought that he was going to be a favorite to get it. But then let's also mention this, is that if you look at Nate Oats, we did our way too early top 25 tonight, okay? I think you can argue Alabama's the number 1 team in the country coming into next year, depending on how stuff falls out. Kentucky's got to put a roster together. Arkansas's got to put a roster together. Duke's going to be good. Kansas is going to be good. But Alabama can return everybody except Aaron Estrada off last year's team. And so I only bring it up because to me, I just don't see the scenario where it makes sense for him to leave Alabama, not this offseason. For what? To go to UConn or to go to Kentucky to rebuild a roster from, he's got a national championship type roster coming back next season. And he's going to go to Kentucky to start from scratch and have to bring in 10 new players. Give me a break. Doesn't make sense.